Okay, so I believe that we are alive. So, Joe, thank you so much for being with us. Welcome to the Human Mode Conversations. So, before we start, I just wanted to, Joe, tell you why I started these conversations. So, basically, I talk to many leaders and I see that they feel anxious, uncertain, quite overwhelmed with everything that it's going on with, AI. And I feel that, like, so many of them, they feel that they're going to be replaced. Like, there is this, like, fear of becoming obsolete. So I thought that if we can have these conversations, it doesn't mean that we're going to have all the answers, but we can just create that, like, insights, awareness, kind of mindset shift, paradigm shifts that leaders need to take actions for what's happening. So this is the why behind this project. So you are a professor of management practice at Harvard Business School, and you also co-founded the project of managing the future of work. So if I wanted to talk to anyone, it would have been you for sure, talking about what's coming and how to get ready for it. Can you please just first describe a bit the project that you're doing and what is really the goal or the objective of this for organizations?
The project Managing the Future of Work, we started about 10 or 11 years ago. And it came from some research we were doing that showed that American executives felt that the workforce in the United States had been a historic source of competitive advantage for American companies, but that advantage was declining rapidly. In fact, it was the variable in some research we had done that it was had the biggest change in direction and magnitude of change. So prior to becoming a professor here, I'd been a student here. I was the CEO of a global consultancy called Monitor, which is now the strategy arm of Deloitte. And I knew from my client work as well that there was a lot of anxiety about talent availability, talent shortages, cost competitiveness of American workers. Not that they were purely just more expensive per hour, but their productivity in that hour made them not competitive. And so you saw certain industries, media technology and pharma and biotechnology, still being highly productive in the United States, with a lot of other industries beginning to fade away. Uh, we started looking at issues related to the workforce through a bit of an unusual lens, Nogol. We started by saying, let's understand both the way decision makers, usually business executives, but sometimes policymakers, understand it, and workers understand the same issue. And let's contrast those 2 points of view. And we wanted to give decision makers a much better understanding of the issues we thought they were going to regularly confront, that were going to be material and strategic for them about workforce, in language and with data that they could understand.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the research that's done about the workforce is very scholarly. It's brilliant stuff by labor economists, but it's not user friendly. It's mostly written for other economists. So we've been trying to speak through our own podcast, through our publications, through lectures, through a course we have here at the Harvard Business School, to those decision makers about what do they really need to understand and how they should look at it.
That's actually very interesting, Joe, because like I'm an engineer by training, and I remember and I was working as an engineer in Montreal, Canada, like 10 years ago. And this is the moment that I felt something within the system that I was working at. And I became excited about the future of work, thinking about employee engagement. And definitely it was about the time that we talked about millennial, new generation of workforce, what they were after, like the fact that they're just like redefining work, they're searching for meaning and impact. But Unfortunately, and then I, it actually invited me to change my career to do this work. But unfortunately, we haven't, even though, to your point, the work has been around about like 10 years, we haven't necessarily seen that shift in leadership. Like, what is the challenge that leaders are facing, like, to do things differently and to lead differently?
The biggest challenges, I think, come from the depth to which historical practices and management and the management of human assets have sunk their roots into big organizations. Uh, the, the, the Over time, human resources functions have become more procedural, more compliance oriented. They hate exceptions. Um, they're preoccupied with, in the United States, are preoccupied with a limited number of issues historically, diversity and inclusion, but also health benefits. And if they're a unionized company, union relations; if they're not a unionized company, keeping that status, things like that. And so what's been happening over time in multiple dimensions, and this precedes all the tumult being caused by generative AI,
Yes.
whether it was increasing workforce participation by women, or it was the gradual change in the attitudes of people entering the workforce about the role of work in their lives, or now the impact of generative AI. The essence of the current system, certainly in large institutions, is really rooted in 1950s, 60s paradigm, which has been changed on the margin. But for example, we talk about concepts like the glass ceiling. I think the glass ceiling is a phenomena. I don't think it's a phenomena driven by malevolent intent by senior executives. It's because of the nature of career paths to senior roles,
Yes.
and that a large number of women who are choosing to work outside the home elect not to make the investment and the sacrifices relative to their personal lives that would put them on a path to break through that glass ceiling. Similarly, if you've got uh, um, technology that allows work to intrude in 365 days of a white collar worker's life through email and smartphones and whatnot, uh, that's ultimately going to change the attitude of people about work, and they're going to start resenting the fact that it seems their job there is all consuming, and that's fine with the employer. That's for only a subset of jobs, but important subset of jobs. With AI, it's going to be particularly profound because our work, our research here at Harvard Business School with some research partners, such as the Burning Glass Institute, Accenture Research, what we're seeing is that for the average job in the United States, you're going to see a material increase in productivity. So AI can do for an average job about 40% of the tasks that a human being currently does. There are 900 jobs the U.S. government tracks called the so-called ONET codes, occupation network codes. Number 900 in terms of the applicability of AI is roofer. Turns out AI cannot replace the roof on your home. Go figure. But you get to entry level white collar jobs, and the ratios are 70%, 75%, 80%.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're just changing at the average of 40%, that would suggest a major rethinking of job descriptions, of career paths, of incentives and metrics, of spans of control for managers. It would require a substantial reskilling of incumbent workers. Those are all really intimidating tasks that the current infrastructure of the companies are not well configured to do. the typical large company in the United States has been decreasing its training budget for 25 years in order to economize. Um, and so if you go to a company and say, oh, all you really need to do is change every major work process to accommodate generative AI, which means changing your job descriptions, changing where you hire, changing what you evaluate people for to hire them, to promote them, increase the depth and efficacy of your internal training by a factor of 3 as fast as possible. People's heads are exploding. And you can see this in a single piece of data, which is the generative AI is getting more capable faster than we thought it would. And companies are adopting it slower than we thought they would.
Mm-hmm. So, Joe, I have obviously tons of questions that are raising. A few questions. You mentioned the idea of like the leadership paradigms being rooted in like mid-century, like mid 20th century, like concepts of work. But then, which is really a big challenge for larger organizations. Do you see that small, medium businesses will have a bit of more agility or adaptability capacities moving forward because simply of their small sizes, but also because of, like not that history of certain practices? Do you see that this might be an opportunity for SMBs?
It's a mixed picture, I think. Small and medium enterprises, uh, first of all, almost by definition, they're industries that don't benefit hugely from scale, otherwise they wouldn't exist. Um, and they're often the business models are a little bit more straightforward.
Yes.
Um, uh, Also, they often rely on external resources, vendors. Take an ADP, for example, or
Yes.
Randstad, or a QuickBooks.
Yes.
Um, that those are designed for the center of the market. Those are designed for the world as it exists. So you almost need those infrastructure providers, those business service infrastructure providers to pivot. I think ServiceNow is a good example of a very large company that's doing that very effectively, as an aside. Um, but I'm recast a little bit of what you're saying, maybe a slightly different arc, which is pretty soon you're going to see substantial generative AI native companies.
Mm-hmm.
So that the company was built around generative AI is not trying to pivot and incorporate generative AI. And in fact, I personally have been approached by a company that is planning to do that in the high level management consulting industry, in which I was a founder and CEO many years ago. And was I interested in leaving what I'm doing now and becoming the executive chair of that company? And since being a founder nearly killed me when I was in my 20s, I didn't think it was a very smart thing to try in my 60s, so I declined. But the that's going to be in lots of industries where data analysis is pivotal competitive advantage, where there are relevant data sets that can be assembled from something other than an existing company's records, where you're going to see some interesting activities. And if I may just say this, there's an absolute law of generative AI, which is they that have a lot of data that start learning from it sooner
Mm-hmm.
win. So the caution that companies are exercising is understandable because the extent of the change they're going to need to make to maximize the benefit they get from AI is daunting.
Yes.
But they better hope that a key competitor or a generative AI native doesn't start doing substantially more faster, because they could fall sufficiently behind that it'll almost be impossible to catch up.
Wow. So you mentioned another thing that it's really dear to my heart because I'm a woman, but also because what I've seen as well with women in the workforce. Like in Canada, for example, we have 1 year of maternity leave. We have 18 months of like being away as a, like what this last 6 months is unpaid, but the employer cannot like, fire you. But even with everything put in place, I saw firsthand myself with other like new mothers how they've been sidelined after becoming a mother. Or personally, I've experienced back in 2014 again as I was working as an engineer when my father-in-law was diagnosed with a terminal cancer, that I was losing opportunities because I couldn't work after 5 o'clock. I couldn't work during the weekends. And I think that, and I remember that like before COVID, there was this idea that you put your personal life at the door and you enter. And I think post COVID, that has been a bit like changed. But how can we, I saw your work around like this work that the more we take care of our people, taking care of their people, the more like engaged they will be and the better they will work, and we're just going to retain them. This is an extremely human centric approach, Joe. And with everything happening in AI and the fact that people think that even like we will not need human beings because AI are going to replace them, how can we create this huge shift, like mindset shift within organizations?
Because the technology um, that is emerging, of which AI is a major subset, but not everything.
Yes.
When we're getting in sensors, um, cage-free robots, things like that. There's going to be a major impact on the labor force. And strangely, in many ways, what that's going to do is make the human assets of the company more important because, yes, your AI can tell you, um, uh, answer a question by looking at 100% of your 10 million last 10 million transactions if you're a bank, but it can't recognize when it's combined two types of transactions that shouldn't be in the same data set if you didn't ask it the right query, or if the logarithm that's driving that small or large language model has got a flaw in it, shortcoming in it. That takes someone with some judgment who's looking at the data and says, this doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
Um, so I'll give you a quick example. I asked a leading large language model the other day how many United States senators were previously governors of the states they were elected from. And it said zero. And that's incorrect.
Mhm.
Both senators from Virginia were former governors. Both senators from New Hampshire were the former governors, and there are several others. So it still makes errors. What a lot of the kind of technical analytical skills that people have had to master to get qualified for jobs will now be done by the AI. Well, what's left of the job then? All the human skills, all the social skills, the ability to work in teams, the ability to deal with uncertainty, to identify new phenomena, the ability to empathize with the strange class of highly imperfect, unpredictable assets called human assets. So, uh, some of my colleagues who study this topic are very bullish about all the new jobs AI will create. I'm a little more cautious, but the what is going to be a constant is that certainly in a post-industrial economy like the United States, the quality of your human assets is going to matter for a lot. And experience in the company is going to matter for a lot. Why? we're getting to an era which we've never seen before, which is, well, two variables we've never seen. We have a dominant technology that gets more productive by itself without intervention. And that does sound like science fiction, but that is what's happening. The second thing is that pretty soon the half-life of the versions of a lot of technologies that people are using will be shorter than the time it takes to master the use of that technology. So the churn cycle in a lot more and more important technologies of the future will get faster and faster as they improve faster and faster, which means I can't just go out and rely on hiring in the spot market for labor someone who's expert on this next thing, but doesn't know anything about my company. I'm going to have to keep the people I've got, and I'm going to need to keep them because they're the people who are going to know the way we do things, our culture, our customer base, our economics, our history. So as they're constantly accommodating this technological churn, they're building a relative context for the deployment of that technology. Well, that means I've got to fight things that drive turnover. Mm-hmm. So you are being confronted with really a choice in your unfortunate circumstances of caregiving for your father-in-law with I have to forego opportunity or I have to find a different employer that's prepared to accommodate this and give me opportunities that are better than ones I think I'm going to have in my current employer. That's an unfortunate outcome, but one employers will be very wise to try to avoid in the future. Not only because the direct cost of turnover is often more than 100% of the total comp package for a year of the person that leaves voluntarily, but also you're losing all that implicit knowledge and knowledge of the organization that's going to be essential to making these new technologies work effectively.
That's actually, Joe, extremely insightful because obviously turnover rate has been always one of the pain points for leaders and for organizations. But now what you're adding is that not only we're losing that workforce or that labor or that professional, but we're losing their whole partnership with our AI, like teammates, if we say so, or the AI generated work. So we're just really missing that context that has been built between the humans and the machines. But I have so basically after quitting my career in engineering, I've worked on the idea of like, okay, what is at the core of successful teams? And I thought it was like, the idea of high performance, being engaged, being like fulfilled, and obviously also being future ready. And I collaborated with a PhD candidate at a time at McGill. And we came up with the idea. We actually found the research of Amy Edmondson, your colleague, on the concept of psychological safety. So since 2018, this is what I've been working on. And I have to say that before COVID, traditional leaders would say that when we say that culture is important, you need it, they would say that people are paid here to work. They don't need to be happy here. And this is not a therapy session. And on the other side, the startup community and leaders would say that, oh, we have like free beer and hot dogs on Fridays. We have futsal. So it was a very wrong, I would say an incorrect definition of culture and team dynamic and contribution. And post COVID, I see that this has been changed. But for people that for someone who's been working with companies and organizations, we're still extremely far from building that cultural infrastructure for this new era, meaning that creating environments where people can contribute, can actually use their judgment, can share the evaluation of the work done by AI. All the guests that I had, they talk about experimentation, but we know that the high price of doing mistakes and making like sharing like ideas or challenged in the status quo. So how can culturally we can really shift this mindset and move from this industrial mindset that we have to work with like robots into creating climates or environments where human skills, we can unlock human potential and tap into human skills. Like, how does this shift going to look like?
I think, like most shifts in business, that the way that's accomplished is by the relative performance of companies. You can go to a lot of executives and say, um, um, well, you've got a very what's called scientific management approach to this, where there are rules, and you're trying to instruct your workers just to do what they're told and don't swim outside their lane or whatever. And yes, if you're running a auto assembly plant, you don't want people making up things as they go along and
Yeah.
saying, well, what if we put the engine in the front seat and the air conditioning in the trunk? But for the vast majority of workers in a post-industrial economy, that becomes it's kind of an irrelevant distinction, and the level of automation in future auto factories, especially with what's going on with so-called cobots, is going to be even higher than today. Um, but companies that outperform because they've broken the code on that problem, um, will just gain market share. And
Mm-hmm.
look, there's never been a shortage of bad managers in big companies and small.
Yes.
And a startup team that can't keep its key technical talent because the founder is a poor manager or
Yes.
is uh, difficult to work for, or just like a big company that constantly hemorrhages its best young talent because it has no moral purpose, because people are locked into predetermined advancement cycles. Just to give you an illustration, a number of large companies have created what's called talent marketplaces, where people can go out and see projects that other parts of the organizations are trying to staff as a part-time, short-term kind of internal gig.
Yes.
Companies that have those things see a pretty dramatic reduction in the turnover of recently hired graduates. Where historically that recently hired graduate be told, oh, you have to be in this assistant manager role for 3 years before you can be promoted. Those are the rules. They're now told, well, you generally get promoted in 3 years, but there are a bunch of other things you can learn and other parts of the business you can get exposed to, and maybe build your reputation with some other parts of the business that maybe a manager over there will say, well, come on, you did great on this project. Come on over and work for us, and we'll give you that promotion, or we'll create an opportunity for you to learn a new skill that you think will have value inside the company, but even if you want to leave the company. So companies, just a little innovation like that can reduce your turnover. Well, turnover is expensive, as we said,
Yes.
and retaining talent is more and more important going forward. So this all gets you can go to executives and say, do this because it's the right thing. Wouldn't you want your sons and daughters to work at a company that did the type of thing I'm suggesting? Don't you wish someone had done for you what I'm suggesting you do for entry level workers? And they'll smile and they'll nod. Most of them say that's a great thinking. If only we could afford it, or how I'm going to pay for it. But when they start seeing performance metrics fall because they're not doing certain things,
Yes.
or rise because they are doing certain things, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where people start saying, I need to do this to meet my overarching goals. And hey, I get to feel better about myself and my company at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. But what I really care about are the goals.
Yes. And with that, I would love to wrap our conversation, because this is exactly what I hear from so many leaders, is that we want to do things differently. we want to lead differently, but we are facing with this resistance to change from our higher management, from our team employees, from ourselves, the self doubts. What is your advice, like, or like a small action that they can do to take just the next step towards a different future? What would you tell them?
It would be very dependent on their industry, but I would say that they need to identify two or three material elements of their performance
Mhm.
that they're dissatisfied with, and then really go about creating fresh insights, data, so they can understand what's driving that lack of performance and develop a specific strategy for it. The degree to which companies rely on partial data, old data, badly integrated data, or just plain assumptions about the way the world works that are not tested is really remarkable. Now, the good news is that generative AI makes that hugely easier,
Mhm.
that it's very good at getting and relating data sets. So I'd pick some of those key problems. I would be getting capability either from internal world or external world, start configuring some tools to deepen my understanding of them so I can take more intelligent actions. And I might start in 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 a, in a typical American company for individual contributor jobs. Turnover rates can be 30-35%. In some industries like retail and food service, it can be 70%.
Wow.
So, in some industries, I'd start there. In financial services, I'd start with risk management. If in healthcare distribution, I'd start with productivity. But you the any as I tell my students here at Harvard, any system, any process is perfectly designed to create the outcomes it regularly creates. Please note I didn't say it's intended to create. So if you've got a process that's regularly creating high cost of sales because you've lots of inability to get your sales force to close deals, you need to understand that yelling and screaming and pounding the desk or asking nicely or what and everything in between to have that process create a different outcome isn't going to work. It's the process that doesn't work.
Mhm.
So get data about what's going on in the process and apply existing technologies, state of the art, but existing now available to you to start understanding how to bring about a change to that process.
Awesome. And I think that is this valid, Joe, that I add to this, that as they want to develop strategies or actions, they really do that with fresh perspectives, and again, not drowning in the older ways of doing things. Like that fresh perspective has to be there. I believe, from what I'm learning from you, in order to develop strategies that will be future proof, basically.
And that's why so many companies ultimately turn to outside consultants to do this because it's very hard
True.
to, if you're used to looking out a window and seeing the same view every morning, it's very hard to imagine a different view. And if you've been in an industry for 30 years or a company for 30 years, it's hard, all the reasons that why you do something the way you do them now are logical. But if it's not generating the outcomes you need, you have to be honest about that.
Yes.
I think that the final thing I would say is you have to have some patience in these things.
Yes.
The the 90 days to beauty and fitness doesn't work. It takes long-term commitment.
Yes.
And if you and that's so often why you see real innovation in new management teams, in newly appointed managing partners, senior directors, CEOs, but then it starts to peter out.
Yes.
And having what you mentioned, my colleague Amy Evanson, she and I taught a course together for about 8 years here. I know her very well. She's probably my best friend on our faculty. And we talk about creating an environment where you can have cognitive conflict,
Yes.
a debate about the facts, a debate about the best choices, without having what's called affective conflict, which is hard feelings, argument,
Sentiments,
tension,
yes.
negativity between people. Very hard environment to create, but that's the type of environment good executives create, nurture, and support.
Yes.
Um, and that relies on types of skills that a lot of managers don't have. So it's harder than it sounds.
And I totally agree with you that, I think that for the longest time we talked about creating this environment to get performance and, create a learning environments. But I believe that as we're going through transformation and being able to thrive in the future of work, creating psychologically safe environments in order to unlock this human potential, it becomes more and more important. So, Joe, thank you so much, first of all, for like joining these conversations. Like everything you shared, I believe that the leaders will learn a lot from it, and I hope that it will just give them a different way of looking at working, collaborating, and leading. A final question that I want to ask from you is that, we're talking a lot about AI replacing everything. What do you think that it's going to be one human element or something about humans that you think that machines will never be able to replicate?
Um, well, I can't imagine a machine having um, create independent creativity.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, they can mimic. They're really prediction engines. They're not thinking,
Yes.
and so it can look at every impressionist piece of art and describe the common attributes and maybe create something that integrates those principles. But I sincerely doubt it's going to be very good. And we can ask AI right now to compose a hit pop song, and it
Yeah.
comes up with elevator music. And uh, I think that also reflects it'll never have a real grasp of the human condition,
Yes.
how humans respond to things emotionally. Its ability to have anything other than synthetic empathy
Yes.
is going to be limited.
It's interesting that you're saying, because I also like was listening to something from Yuval Harari that it was just saying that it's that consciousness that we have as human beings, probably, and the moral judgment that comes with it, the creativity that comes with it. It's probably something that will AI will never be able to replicate, at least for now. Thank you so much, Joe, for doing the amazing work that you're doing, for joining this conversation. And I hope that I actually encourage everyone to check the work that you're doing, the project of managing the future of work. Reach out to you on LinkedIn. And again, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for including me in the conversation.
Thank you. Awesome.